joining us, and my guest is Caprice Taylor-Mendez. Thank you so much for being here. Let me get your title right. Strategic Program Manager for the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven.
Correct.
That's a mouthful. And what does that mean?
Well, it's a blessing. It means a blessing. I get to work with amazing people at the Community Foundation, supporting our nonprofit sector, and my two areas of specialty are supporting those who work with and on behalf of immigrant families here in specifically Greater New Haven for the Community Foundation, but we're also part of a statewide collaborative, so I also engage at a statewide level around that work. And then the other area is supporting individuals who are impacted by our criminal justice system, including children of people who were incarcerated.
Do you feel like the general public has any idea really what's going on?
I have to say no. And it isn't from lack of wanting to know, but a lot of this information isn't as accessible. And because of the work that I do and the expertise, and including the people who are directly impacted today on these issues, they bring to bear a lot of information that I'm so grateful being here today, because trying to provide access to that information is important. One of the things, for example, was why are immigrants being detained and incarcerated and deported at such huge rates now? And not that long ago, under President Obama's term, there was a Democratic senator that promoted legislation that requested for the federal government to provide tax-paying dollars in a contract with detention centers specifically for immigrants that allotted over 30,000 beds or spots, may or may not be with a bed, spots for immigrants to be detained. And as soon as that bill became law, sure enough, last year over I think it was like 34,000 immigrants on a daily basis, on average, were detained. Across the country? Across the country. And what that meant for taxpayers, and I'm a taxpayer, I did not know this. It was $90 on average per day per person last year. There's 365 days in the year, 30-something thousand people per day times 90. Those are staggering figures. Staggering figures. This is near and dear to your heart. Yes. You came to this country how? And I have heard your story, and it is very compelling. Sure, and so I was raised here in Connecticut, and turns out it was at age of 5. My siblings and I moved to New Haven, Connecticut, and our father, he was in Guatemala. We were all born in Guatemala. And he wrote a book to provide greater access to education for the Native Americans in Guatemala, majority Mayan. And this textbook, because it was a standardized curriculum, you buy one book and you could get some of your math covered, their Spanish literacy, and some science. And basically, if you buy that one book, it'll carry you through the majority of your school year. And so my mom and him actually had a printing press in the house, and my mom told me she was cranking the printing press, and it was about giving poor people the chance to have education. And unfortunately, because education is power, right? Education is power. And unfortunately, educators of the poor, especially Native Americans of Guatemala in the countryside, educators were then an enemy of the state. So with this book, my dad did not know it would make him an enemy of the state. And they came knocking on the door, took the books, and only one copy exists. My uncle, my father's brother, had gotten engaged with an African American, my Aunt B, who lives here in New Haven, lives here in Connecticut, but she was living in New Haven at that time. So my uncle was showing off his new fiance, and she was only 18 around that time. She got a copy of the book that was fresh off the press, and she now has the only copy.
Because they burned all the rest.
They burned all the rest, tore apart the printing press, and a few days later, another knock came on the door, and the man behind the door told my mother, if your husband isn't gone in less than 7 days, the next time you'll see him is dead. And that was in 1970s, early 70s in Guatemala. And unfortunately, my dad couldn't apply to be an asylee or a refugee. It's literally the United States stating, we will take your refugees, we will give you protection from your government, and we condone what your, we condemn what your government is doing. And at that time, for 30 years more, the Guatemalan government was in cahoots with the United States government. Again, our tax dollars providing military training to Guatemalan military, teaching them how to torture their own people so that the 1% wealthy that controlled over 60% of the wealth could maintain that status. And an educated population of poor people was not in their best interests, so they thought. And so my dad had to flee. And my grandmother, she was living in New Haven, his mother. She moved here in the 60s because her youngest of 11 married African-American former military who was based in Guatemala. They fell in love, and she moved to New Haven. So my dad was one of the youngest of 11 that moved to New Haven. He was one of the last ones to move here and settle. So as soon as his life was threatened, he went where his family was, which was here.
And you guys stayed back there until he brought you
Yes, he had to wait until, I think it was another year. And he had to re-enter, risking his life. And he went with family members going back to Guatemala to get us. And we were able to move through to Mexico, move from Mexico to through California. And I didn't remember how we got here. I didn't remember driving in a car, being on a train, being on a plane. And I was about 10, I think the last time I actually asked my parents.
Mm-hmm. Is it painful for them to talk about this?
And yes, my mom hasn't necessarily come out publicly about this. Mm-hmm. And I discussed with her last weekend that I spoke about this at a conference, and she actually, I know that she's shy about it. She's
and
never.
Here you are again talking about it. And I guess my point is that we need to look at people who have come to this country, how they love America, they've come here at a cost, at a big cost.
18 years not being able to see family. We couldn't get papers. There was no legal way to access papers. My dad's life was threatened, and his greatest fear was, so was his wife and children's life threatened. My godfather, my mom's brother, lives now out in California, and he's like a second father to me. He married a Guatemalan, a much older age. He went to Guatemala after he got his papers, visited, fell in love, and she happened to be a recent graduate to teach elementary school children. Her classmates all had the same goal. They wanted to teach poor children in the countryside, and she didn't get to fulfill that goal because she got married and moved to California. Well, that saved her life. All of her classmates are dead. They were all killed because they wanted to support poor children to learn how to read and write, and our tax dollars paid for that, unfortunately.
Your work now, given your background, which is frightening on all kinds of levels for your family, how are you helping families here not be afraid, assimilate to Connecticut?
Yes. And so, number one is don't give up hope. I grew up in Connecticut. I grew up in the United States. Even though I don't look it, I'm over 40.
You look very young.
Thank you. And I know the compassion that U.S. citizens and non-U.S. citizens hold alike in their heart. And so I am a living bridge between two different worlds. I have family members who speak another language that isn't English. I grew up from kindergarten all the way through master's at Harvard in a different world than the ones that my family grew up in. And my siblings and I, we bridge two different worlds, and the friends that I have are from all over the place. Growing up in New Haven, which is where we're at now, Portuguese immigrants were big. People don't know that. I grew up around Portuguese immigrants. Their parents did not speak English. My mom was learning English, and she couldn't wait to see my friends' parents because she had someone to talk to. I don't even know how they managed to talk about the children, me and my friends, with two different languages.
Very diverse.
Very diverse.
Yes.
And so that's how I grew up, where I love food. I love food from all over because I grew up in New Haven. There's people from all over this, the planet in New Haven, and I always say there's one of everything. So if I love particular type of cuisine, I know New Haven has at least one of everything. And you take away immigration, you take away the rich diversity. And so I believe that most people, if they knew the facts and didn't go by what mainstream tries to say, right now our leader in the White House, you know, criminalizing human beings, not seeing them as full human beings. I believe like the United States and Connecticut people have way more compassion. And if they understood, like for example, current immigration laws, if a parent gets detained, the only law that they could not meet was not have immigration papers. If they get detained and they're held in jail or they're held in these immigration detention centers, which over 70% of them are privately owned, that held immigrants last year. So all that money went to private companies.
People don't know that.
People don't know that. Yeah. And if a parent is detained, they're not able to be present in their child's life. And in the unfortunate circumstance with both parents are detained, or it's a single family household, and there's no parental guardian watching over the children. In some states could be up to 30 days, consecutive days, in others it's up to 60 days, consecutive days, so the time frame varies. But if they're absent consecutive days, they will lose parental custody of their child for life. A lot of people don't even know this truth. So there is concrete fear that your children will be ripped out of your arms for life. And if you're deported, you have no legal entry point to come back and fight for your children, and they become wardens of the state if they are U.S. born. And for Connecticut, there are thousands of children that fall under that category where they are U.S. born, yet their parents don't have papers.
There is a program that I heard about when you and I first met to try to get mothers
Yes.
out of jail.
Yes.
By Mother's Day.
Yes.
Tell me about this program. How long has it been running? And this is sanctioned by the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven. So tell me about this.
Yes. So a little less than 2 years ago, I believe, the Connecticut Bail Fund was developed in conjunction with the leadership of a Yale student who graduated out of Yale, saw that there was a huge issue around people being incarcerated because of poverty. And so there is incarceration. If you committed a crime, you do the time. And there's also incarceration. You're waiting to find out whether the judicial system deems you as innocent or guilty. So you are being held and you're not able to pay bail. And a lot of low-income, poor people can't afford to pay bail.
And this may be for a misdemeanor.
And it could be for misdemeanor, for anything. And so last year, in 2017, they launched an immigration bail fund. And last year, there was a young woman, her issue, she didn't have papers, grew up in Greater New Haven. Her bail was set at $1,500. Most of them can be even higher. She was held in jail for immigration violation for over 18 months because she couldn't make a $1,500 bail. The immigrant bail fund was created last year before she hit 19 months, and they bailed her out. And it's a nonprofit, and so the Community Foundation, we're proud to support innovative strategies that really look at equity and justice, and truly it's compassion. And so for Mother's Day, behind all of these policy stories are children, innocent children. And for Mother's Day, Connecticut Bail Fund is working hard to try to acquire enough funds to pay for the bail for more mothers to be able to come home and be there for their children in time for Mother's Day.
Where are these children staying if they don't have relatives? Where are they?
And so, worst case scenario, the parents were not informed on developing a document, a legal document, dictating who will take child custody, legal custody, in the case of whether you're deported or whether you're put in prison, and to make sure that those 30 days, or I need to find out exactly how many days in Connecticut, the bond won't be severed for life with your child, legal bond. And so if in the unfortunate case that they were not prepared, they did not fill out that form, did not attend Know Your Rights training that some of our other community partners who are also supporting Connecticut Bail Fund, such as Unidad Latina en Acción, Apostles Immigrant Services, run by a nun. All of these great people that I get to work with are offering these trainings, teaching parents and families to know your rights, worst case scenarios, so that it won't become the nightmare that it can become.
I think people don't remember that many people flee a nation because they want to live, right?
Yes.
Case in point, your father. Going forward with the foundation, the work that you're doing, is there enough money to build these agencies to help others that come here?
To be honest, every penny counts. We received national support from Grantmakers Concerned for Immigrants and Refugees. It was a matching fund. Local people stepped up. We had about, let's say, around a $40,000 gap. How many dollars in requests last year seeking support, and how many were actually very strong applications from our nonprofit partners, and the strategies were deemed as priority, and we had a huge gap. And individual donors stepped up, and they said, I will donate some of my funds from our donor advised funds that the Community Foundation holds. And the benefit then is you're pooling collective dollars for greater impact. And on top of it, we had national matching dollars. What did that do for us? We would not have a statewide strategy where there's one specific strategy from the many that we're able to fund from that, which allows for a nonprofit New Haven legal team going out to where Connecticut immigrants are held in detention for immigration violations, they get moved immediately out to the north, New Hampshire or Massachusetts.
So they're really far away from their families.
Far away from their families and far away from legal support. And with $6,000, we're able to have dedicated legal team to go out, I call it like the last saving grace, and screen for Connecticut immigrants held in immigration detention in those areas. Those who are sent immediately to Texas, we don't have that opportunity. But then the lawyers start asking them questions around their immigration history, and maybe they can actually apply for asylum. And if they can actually fit what is required to apply for asylum, if you are behind bars, your likelihood of getting any chance of being able to stay here with your family is slim. But studies have shown over 80% rate of improvement of your chances if you fight your case from a point of freedom. And that is what the Connecticut Bail Fund is doing, along with other partners like Greater New Haven Legal and Sister Mary Allen at Postal Immigrant Services.
So there's all these inner workings going on that none of us really know about, but they are at work and they're doing good work. All of us came here from somewhere. My grandparents immigrated here from Sweden and came through Ellis Island. We all got here somehow. But do you think, and maybe I need to ask you this again, given your experiences, what's the best way to get the facts out about what is going on and how wonderful America is to come to? Because I think you said you may think America has trouble, but your country is 10 times worse.
Yes, yes. Over 100,000 people disappeared, killed in the span of 30 years. Quote unquote, a peace treaty was signed in late 90s, yet many people are still being killed. Former military leaders are now dealing drugs and trying to force children to do that. We have a few children, unaccompanied minors in Connecticut, who are fleeing those very same situations. And so, yes, situations are tough. And how to get information, the Community Foundation, we created this report. Understanding the impact of immigration in Greater New Haven, and that's available online. We also have online a list of partners. They're a perfect source of go-to for information. There's also the American Immigration Council that does research on the added value of immigrants, including something that our report was released before this was released. They claim that over $3.3 billion were provided by immigrant-led households in federal taxes here in the state of Connecticut in 2014 alone. So our immigrants are supporting the greater good, as well as $1.8 billion in state and local taxes were paid in 2014 by immigrants. And a lot of the issue is whether undocumented immigrants have the right to be here. Well, they're paying an estimate of $124 million in state and local taxes. That was in 2014 alone. So 2015, about the same, 2016, about the same. And the interesting part is they never asked for a refund check. Undocumented immigrants. So that stays in the coffers of the state.
Just getting back to your own personal story, how did you educate yourself and learn the language and take care of your family members and end up going to Harvard? Because you just strived and figured it out?
There were people who supported me and believed in me and cared for me along the way. And the first people were my parents. And they believed in me, and they would say, you know, we came here so that you get to live your dreams. My mom and my dad's dreams were stunted. My mom, she is so family-oriented that every Christmas, every holiday, it was heartache because she didn't know when she would see her family again. And so I would see them and the sacrifices that they made so that I could have a better life. And in return, this is the way that I know how to repay them the best, which is to live my life in gratitude.
It's hard for you, I know. And you're, you know, I said to you, Caprice, when I met you, when you lay down at night, do you remember how hard things are and you just keep going? I mean, what do you think about?
So, it breaks my heart to know there are children living and growing up here, and my parents tried to keep away from us the fact that we were undocumented. But something told me there was something different about us. But children now do not have the luxury to knowing that reality. And maybe they are not undocumented, but their parents are. So there was a recent study done out of UCLA, I believe, that showed the trauma that children are facing in school now, stemming from the immigration politics. And there's post-traumatic stress disorder, but you would call it post, is only after what causes the trauma is gone. So they're currently living under traumatic times. And I also have hope when I go to bed at night because of where I work and the people that I work with and the community meetings that I go to and people who step up and say, how can I help? And so I get to see both worlds. So I think that with the national conversations, it allows us at a local level to talk about what our real values are. Will we be driven by political framing? And frankly, I think a lot of this is about corporations, the immigration detention centers, to try to fill those beds as much as possible, and using race baiting, criminalizing other human beings as a way to be able to incarcerate children, mothers, and fathers alike. And I think that we're smarter than that. As humanity, our hearts are stronger than that. And I get to see people step up and show what true compassion is. And that's the world I choose to live in. And I'm working every day with co-creators of a compassionate world. And so I'm so appreciative of being here today, so thank you.
Caprice, you are a shining light. Thank you for the work that you're doing for so many others who don't have a voice. I appreciate you coming on so much.
Thank you.
Caprice Taylor-Mendez with the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven.
Thank you.
Spend all night kissing and if was right here, then who else is missing? Got a little sidetracked if I'm so wishing to find the keys to the door, but it's also a metaphor. Things keep locked in the grocery store, but mine, just to save time, I'll skip right ahead to the last ride.